There are 108,000 chemicals registered in Europe. 40,000 are in common use. 10 times as many workers die from occupational disease as die from industrial accidents. Occupational disease can take time to manifest itself. It often comes about as a result of exposure to materials that employees handle during their working life. In other words, substances hazardous to health. Because of that, there's a need to control them. Hence, COSHH, the Control of Substances Hazardous to Health Regulations, first introduced in 1988, updated in 1994, and reviewed periodically. If exposure to hazardous substances isn't prevented or properly controlled, it can lead to serious illness or even death. It can also result in employers being prosecuted, losing productivity, being subject to civil action and bad publicity. The employee can suffer many things, including injury, loss of earnings, and it can seriously affect every aspect of their life. What are hazardous substances? Hazardous substances come in a variety of forms and not just the obvious one, like bleach and chemicals. They can be seen as dust, liquids, particularly chemicals and bleach, fumes, smoke, mists, as in aerosols, vapors, and gases. Hazardous substances can be found in all sorts of working environments: factories, offices, schools, quarries, mines, farms, hospitals, gymnasiums, swimming pools, and so on. And as they're hazardous, they're threatening the health of workers and others that may be exposed to them. What are an employer's responsibilities? The employer shall not carry out any work that exposes his employees to substances that can damage their health until a suitable and sufficient assessment of the risks involved has been carried out. The employer should ensure that the exposure is either prevented, if reasonably practical, or adequately controlled. And this doesn't mean just providing personal protective equipment. There's more to COSHH than that. The employer has to take reasonable steps to ensure that any controls followed or personal protective equipment used are done so correctly. Maintain, examine and test control measures that have been provided as a result of a risk assessment. Monitor exposure in the place of work. Where necessary, arrange for suitable health surveillance of employees. Provide information, instruction and training for employees about the risks created by exposure to hazardous substances and the precautions that should be taken.
We are dealing with some fairly dangerous substances, molten aluminium, and it's important that everybody understands their individual part in the production process and that they observe the rules. We're very conscious of health and safety. We don't want any of our employees to do anything that we wouldn't do, and we want them to be safe at all times.
We handle some fairly hazardous chemicals here, and it is important that we don't put our workers at risk. So it is important to measure the levels of the chemicals that we're exposing people to, and we also measure the health changes to people, if there are any.
It's the way that you do the work, such that you don't pose a risk to health to the employee. And therefore we had to not only find out which materials were hazardous, but also how those materials were being used in the workplace. And when that was done, then you had to write the risk assessment up and actually implement it. And any controls that were available at the time, we need to assess them.
What are an employee's responsibilities? They must make proper use of any control measure and use personal protective equipment or any other facility provided. They must return any equipment to appropriate accommodation or designated storage. Any defects in equipment related to COSHH assessments must be reported to their employer. How do employers carry out their responsibilities?
Any substance that comes onto our site, the supplier has to supply a material safety data sheet, and that material safety data sheet is brought to my attention, and I review them and look at whether there are some implications for the employees from that material that may be brought in.
Dust and vapours are handled by totally enclosing the plant and using local exhaust ventilation. And as a secondary protection, we also will get people to wear suitable protective equipment when necessary.
Everybody is involved in the COSHH process from start to finish. Nobody can bring anything on site without permission, and everybody who is going to use that substance is consulted at some stage during the process to ensure that they are happy with the substance, they're happy with the precautions we're taking, and they are happy with the work instructions that they're given.
Control is achieved by implementing good management techniques and the proper use of a hierarchy of control, which includes elimination, prohibiting practice or replacing the substance. Substitution, ask yourself, can we do it in a different way? Enclosure, isolate the working area. Safe systems of work, clearly identifying the correct procedure for dealing with hazardous substances. Written procedures, which should include all necessary safety instructions. Adequate supervision, particularly for inexperienced operatives. Train staff about the hazards involved and how to use safety equipment. Information by strategically placed signs and warnings. Provide personal protective equipment, use of which should be a last resort as clearly required in the COSHH regulations. There are no non-hazardous substances, there are only safe ways of using them. What we're going to see now is how COSHH is implemented in companies, organisations and working environments. You'll see examples of good practice in prevention, in exposure and control of such substances. In this situation, a grinding wheel produces dust and fumes. The process can't be eliminated or substituted, so management chose to provide local exhaust ventilation. This involves putting a hood as close as possible to the source, which extracts the hazardous substances to a filter box. By doing this, the dust and fumes are controlled and consequently prevented from causing harm. Note also that the operative is wearing hearing protection as a result of a noise assessment, and he is also wearing eye protection in accordance with good safety practice. Similarly, this company has chosen to enclose their dust extraction system, and they have in place measures that provide their operatives with personal protective equipment, ensuring a safe working environment. Here we have a system that was developed to prevent skin irritation. This machine fixes bearings to water pumps. When the job was done manually, the glue used caused skin irritation and disease. The company therefore decided it was necessary to engineer control of the substance, and the operation is now totally enclosed and automated, eliminating the need for operatives to handle the glue. Control of a substance, preventing harm to people. Automation helps eliminate the possibility of human error. Engineering control helps achieve this. This company manufactures cleaning materials for the catering and service industries. At the end of the process, these materials are relatively harmless, but in bulk, they have the potential to create dust hazards. To control the substance and prevent harm, the company has engineered a system that totally encloses the whole process from the delivery of raw materials through to the packaged product. This also applies to production processes involving liquid substances, which are also automated and enclosed. To support their total control systems, they've added further emergency provision, such as rapid washing points and emergency procedure systems that everybody is made aware of in case of accidents. This environment not only has liquid as a potentially hazardous substance, but also fine metal waste material that could also be harmful. They have chosen to automate and enclose the process to achieve control of the hazardous substances. So how do you get started with implementing COSHH regulations?
Any safety initiative, whatever it might be, basically is threefold. It's to recognise the potential problems, evaluate the associated risks attached, and then control those that are necessary. Let's recognise what we've got risk-wise by listing, usually by occupation or task-wise, but the sort of jobs that go on, at the work face, because a lot of people get the wrong impression about COSHH. It's to do with the relationship between the substance and the job. It's not just the substance itself, and many companies take a substance-based approach first without really looking at the interchange between the job. Look at what's been identified and the approach that was used to identify the substances. Was it a task-based or was it a substance-based? And then where are we with the risk evaluation, and basically start from there. Remember the 3 basic steps. Recognise, go and look for the problems, that's what we're doing, as the workforce. Evaluate the potential risk behind the problems that you find and ask the workforce. They're the guys that work with it, they'll tell you. And then look at introducing some controls where necessary.
If you're responsible for COSHH in any way, you should be asking yourself these questions. Am I confident that all potential hazardous substances in my operation are properly controlled? Am I confident that all control procedures are properly implemented? Am I satisfied that all staff responsible to me are aware of their responsibilities in relation to COSHH? Reviewing is a key issue of good health and safety management and is particularly relevant to COSHH. Again, here are some of the questions you should be asking. Have any of the chemicals we use changed since the last COSHH assessment? Have any of the processes changed since the last assessment? Are all the COSHH assessments relevant to my place of work? Have any new hazards arisen as a result of any new operations since the last assessment? Are the staff properly trained? Is the training properly recorded? Are the servicing procedures on any controls still being carried out? Are the relevant checks being carried out at the correct frequency? Is all relevant documentation up to date? A copy of these questions is included in your video package. Even water is a substance that's potentially hazardous to health. Don't underestimate anything in your working environment. Water can also harbour bacteria that has in the past proved fatal. COSHH regulations in 1994 introduced a requirement for companies to consider the risks Legionella may pose to those affected directly or indirectly within their working operation. Legionella grows when the water temperature is 20 to 45 degrees centigrade. When a potential problem is identified, you must take precautions to control the bacterial growth and ensuring the water system is treated as soon as possible. If in doubt, seek specialist advice. The health and safety of your employees is of paramount importance. Complying with COSHH will not only reduce the risk of serious injury, lessen the risk of prosecution, but also save you money and possibly increase productivity. Knowing what COSHH is all about, what are hazardous substances within your place of work, what your responsibilities are as an employer and an employee, and how you carry out your responsibilities towards the prevention and control of potentially hazardous substances will go a long way in helping you to conform to the COSHH regulations. Through careful management, assessment and control, the requirements of COSHH within your business can be kept to a level which will ensure a safe and healthy working environment for all your employees and for anyone who may be affected by it. After all, a safe and healthy environment is the foundation for any successful business.